A vote in the United Nations could come as early as Tuesday on a draft treaty to regulate the global trade of conventional arms. This following an effort by Iran, Syria, and the DPRK to block its passage last week. Lots of twists to this one. Joining me now for some insight, Reza Marashi. He's the research director for the National Iranian American Council based here in Washington. Welcome. What's your sense about the vote? It looks like there was the block last week, but a lot of people are saying that this can go through. What's your sense?
Yeah, there are some rules and regulations that pertain to the way that the United Nations work, meaning that if you can't reach consensus among all 193 member states of the UN, then you can take it to the General Assembly, where really it only needs a majority vote. And then after the majority vote in the General Assembly, 50 states need to ratify it for it to actually go into effect in the United Nations to become what would, in essence, be law.
This treaty, human rights groups say that while we're discussing this right now, small arms are ending up in the hands of people and innocent victims are being killed as we speak. They're very passionate about this. Mexico as well. What would the treaty do?
The treaty would limit the trans-border crossing of small and heavy arms, light weapons, heavy weapons, and it would in particular limit the impact that it would have on women and children. It would limit the ability for these weapons to get into the hands of non-state actors, though not prevent it altogether. Broadly conceived, it would place greater limitations on the ability for states to transfer these kinds of weapons into whoever's hands, non-state actors most poignantly.
A lot of human rights activists that I've seen speak out on this say that the one continent where you'll see a huge difference is the African continent. Do you suspect that's true?
Sure. I think it goes without saying that the continents and or countries where there are governance issues, you're going to see small arms trade spike because you have increased conflict between the government that currently has power and non-governmental entities that are seeking to remove those groups from power and take power themselves. Africa is a good example of that, but you could see a similar premise take place in the Middle East, other places as well. So sure, it goes without saying that there's great concern in Africa, but when 190 of 193 United Nations members support something, it's much bigger than Africa. It's a global thing.
Will it save lives?
I think so. I mean, less weapons in the hands of less people is going to be a positive outcome, and that's why you see such robust support for this treaty in the United Nations.
We're seeing here in the United States, there's a great debate going on about guns in this country. And I just saw a Republican lawmaker on the air today saying, look, you can pass all these laws, the bad guys will never listen to it. And I guess when you look at it from a global perspective, I guess they would make the same argument here. And I guess that gets into the issue of teeth. Is there teeth in a measure like this? Can it really make a difference?
Yeah, well, we have to start small and work our way up. I mean, any type of international law is never going to be comparable to the kind of laws that each individual nation will have. But if you level the playing field and create similar rules to the game that all players have to play by, that's a very important first step that can lead everybody in the right direction. Now, that being said, all politics are local. So whether or not individual member states ratify this treaty, and if they do, the degree to which they enforce it and implement it remains to be seen. But you have to take that first step before you can gauge how effective a treaty can or can't be in practice.
Quickly, we don't have a lot of time, but I guess I should have probably started here and moved on. But what about the actors who did stand in the way? Syria, Iran, North Korea, what are we to deduce from their steps last week?
As I said before, all politics are local. You know, the Iranian government, the Syrian government, the North Korean government all have concerns because there are currently arms embargoes in place on these three countries that if new treaty is signed into effect, then that's going to further reduce their ability to access these kinds of weapons.
Thank you so much for coming in and offering your analysis.
Thanks for having me.